The Untherapist. Surviving Divorce, Remarriage, Tornadoes, Rip Currents, and Other Forces of Nature by Anne-Lise Jasinski. Disclaimer. The author has tried to recreate events, locales, and conversations from her most accurate memories of them. Some names and identifying details have been changed to protect the privacy of individuals from whom consent was unable to be obtained. Anne-Lise the Untherapist is not a professionally licensed organization. Anne-Lise Jasinski is not a psychologist, psychiatrist, or professionally licensed therapist, and has no formal medical training from any organization. All content provided within this book is for personal use and is not intended to diagnose, treat, prescribe, or cure any illness or disease, whether physical, emotional, mental, or of any other nature. No content shall be construed as a prescription, promise, cure, or advice of any kind. Any information, instruction, or suggestion offered is not medical advice or a substitute for professional medical and psychological diagnosis and care. Do not discontinue or modify any medication presently being taken without proper medical advice from your professional or healthcare provider. Anne-Lise the Untherapist is not responsible for any adverse effects. Use of this book and its accompanying resources constitutes your agreement to have read and understood this information and indicates that you assume complete responsibility for your own well-being on all levels at all times. The author is not affiliated with any religious organization. She uses the word divine to indicate the existence of an entity referred to in various cultures and belief systems as higher power, God, the universe, source, Allah, Buddha, and Great Spirit, among many others. Untherapy does not assume or require adherence to any specific spiritual practice. Untherapy is useful for any person who desires a deeper understanding of human behavior and connection. Introduction. What this book is. I wrote this book for you, my new friend. We haven't been formally introduced yet, but I promise by the end of this book, you're going to know me better than you know most of your closest friends and relatives. Over the past 10 years of becoming the Untherapist, I have discovered that everything is understandable. In writing this story down, I haven't held back anything about that messy process. I want you to see how it all works together, the bad and the good, the hard and the easy, so you can begin to believe that the same is also possible for you. Looking back, if I could have had one thing to help me get from the chapter 1 version of myself, stuck, codependent, triggered, miserable, powerless, to the chapter 12 version of myself, spoiler alert, I end up happy, healthy, empowered, and super in love with my life and my people, I would have wanted someone to simplify the struggle and show me what to do about it. Not in a controlling kind of way, but in a way that returned me to my own inherent ability to heal and learn. I would have wanted someone to reach into the darkness of my fears and turn on the light so I could see what the hell was going on. I would have wanted someone to explain in plain language that even my overwrought mind could understand why the people I loved were all acting crazy. And why, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't seem to feel better, improve my circumstances, or like the person that I saw in the mirror. What this book is not a magic bullet. It will be for you exactly what you want and need it to be. Do the work and you will get the results. I do not claim to be a medical doctor, mental health professional, or certified anything. How this book is organized. The book is divided into 2 parts. Chapters 1 through 8 are the making, in which my life is about forcing things to happen the way I think they are supposed to. Part 2, chapters 9 through 12 is the becoming, in which I gradually learn to trust that the divine trajectory of my life is ever improving and eventually stop trying to manage all the things. Number 2, at the beginning of each chapter is a section called Chapter Framework. This is included to give you a lens through which to view the stories that follow. Every chapter framework includes 2 perspectives. A, old belief without Untherapy, This is what I believed at the time this chapter was happening. It is the set of rules that informed my life view and explained my choices. As counterproductive as many of those choices were, knowing the context will help illustrate how I created the end results I then grappled with. Keep in mind that at the time, I was not self-aware enough to even recognize that I had these beliefs. I simply acted out of my subconscious programming in the way that felt most safe and right for me. B, the untherapist perspective. This section illuminates the understandings I now have as I look back on this portion of my life story and realize what was happening on a deeper level. Keep in mind, until I started practicing untherapy as a lifestyle, these lessons were not part of my awareness in the moment that these stories were happening. They encapsulate the wisdom I have gathered through doing this work over time. Number 3, at the end of this book, I've included an appendix as an additional reference. Here, I detail the components of the Untherapy model of human behavior and illustrate the ways they interact with one another to form your cohesive self. I also include the core perspectives of the Untherapy system in their current and ever-evolving form. How to use this book. Number 1, entertainment. This book contains the pertinent details of my life as they influence the development of Untherapy. My journey to becoming Anne-Lise the Untherapist includes a lot of juicy stories that read like a riveting work of fiction. They could be an entertaining way to pass a Sunday afternoon. If that's what you need right now, bounce lightly over the lesson frameworks at the beginning of each chapter and don't bother downloading the bonus study guides mentioned at the end of each chapter. Number 2, education. If you're into personal development and love educating yourself on the different personality theories that are out in the world, pay special attention to the lesson frameworks at the beginning of each chapter. You may also benefit from the appendix at the end of the book, where you will find an overview of the Untherapy model of human behavior. Number 3, transformation. If you are looking for a deeper understanding of yourself and others, or if you're into maximizing your relationship and discovering new ways to assume personal responsibility for all the things you are creating, for all the ways you are creating your reality right now, make sure you take advantage of the bonus downloadable resources mentioned at the end of each chapter. Work through the ones that really light you up and watch how these concepts illuminate the dark corners of your mind. Untherapy is holistic, addressing emotions, thoughts, and behaviors from many angles. The approach is gentle and gradual. If you make an intentional practice of these principles, over time you will notice major changes. There is also the occasional spontaneous evolution, where your healing seems to culminate in a sudden whoosh of growth that happens all at once. Regardless of pace, it is all working in your favor with perfect timing. What you can do next if you like the book. Number 1, leave a good review. Help other people find this book more easily by letting them know why you enjoyed it and how it helped you. Number 2, share it with your friends. Loan your copy out, or even better, buy a few extra copies and give them as gifts. Number 3, join the Untherapy Academy. Go to theuntherapist.com/Untherapy Academy to learn more about making Untherapy part of your own lifestyle. The Academy offers A, ongoing weekly live interactive support, B, access to an ever-expanding library of essential on-demand courses, C, membership in a distraction-free community of like-minded people, and D, additional bonuses and resources to help you simplify and enjoy your relationships. Part 1, the making. Chapter 1, how did you get so messed up? Chapter framework, the old belief before Untherapy. Life happens to me. Despite my best efforts to be good, I end up in hard places that feel unfamiliar and out of alignment with who I am. Stress and fear are my perpetual companions, so familiar that I don't even notice their omnipresence. I feel out of control and need to be rescued. The Untherapy perspective. Rock bottom moments are gifts that call us to divine relief and healing. When we see ourselves through someone else's eyes and realize we don't relate to our own image, that cognitive dissonance sets up the optimal platform for change. In this state, we are primed to consider new possibilities for our life. We are much more likely to take a new course of action and believe that something will change. Therefore, it does. And the quote for this chapter is, "A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step." Lao Tzu. You want me to shut the door? I reach to close it behind me as I step inside the attorney's luxurious office. He looks up from his cherrywood desk and gives me a slow, lecherous scan from stem to stern. I pause mid-stride, awaiting his cue. Better leave it open, he instructs. My face flushes. I've been made. I was going for subtle sexy that inspires a discount, not will barter for services rendered. I may have overplayed my hand here. I glance at his paralegal to see if she heard. Her deadpan expression tells me she knows the drill. I glance down at my fitted sundress and instinctively clasp my arms over my chest like it's a little chilly. Then I shift my gaze past his coiffed hair and expensive suit at the downtown bustle shimmering 30 stories below us in the Texas heat. I take a quick breath for courage and arrange myself in the gorgeous red leather armchair directly across from him. You're okay, I whisper deep in my heart. The only way out is through. This phrase has given me courage to do so many hard things ever since my midwife Susie introduced it during my first home birth. I think of my firstborn Gideon now. I remind myself why I'm even here in this overpriced office, my 13th attempt to find the right lawyer. My son has been kidnapped and I need you to get him back for me, I began, my voice bolder than I intended. As Mr. Lecherous jots down notes, I weave the tale of my woes. Married to an abusive husband who recently ran off with another woman. While my kids were spending the last week of summer with their dad, without my knowledge or permission, he unenrolled my two older kids, ages 8 and 10, from the only school they'd ever known and put them in the one closest to his new home, 30 miles away. He returned the two youngest, ages 4 and 6, because it just made more sense. In other words, they are more work, so mom should do it, obviously. He has since returned my 8-year-old daughter. Apparently she proved to be too much work also, but he insists that Gideon should stay with him permanently. I measure my words deliberately, taking care to avoid the tender knife pricks in my soul that haunt me every moment since my son was taken. I secretly fear I don't even deserve to be able to raise these kids, but I don't let myself think that now. I have to be on. I must sell this so he will help me. Mr. Lech asks why I've waited almost a year to seek legal counsel. I feign confidence and explain the parenting plan we amicably agreed upon when he first left me 10 months ago. He asks more about the abuse. When did it start? Where did he hit me? Did he ever hit the kids? Did I ever report it? My narrative is concise and clinical, just like I rehearsed. We've been married 11 years. He started beating me 5 years ago. He always hits me where no one can see the bruises, mostly abdomen and head where my hair covers. I was a committed and supportive wife, so it never seemed right to report it. He never hurt the children, but I'm convinced that it's because I was always watching. I don't know what he's capable of doing to my son now that I'm not there to protect him. As I wrap up the pertinent details, Mr. Lech leans back in his chair and clasps his hands thoughtfully behind his head. I steady my gaze to meet his. You're obviously a smart woman and beautiful. He lets his eyes fondle my body again for a moment before continuing. How did you get here? The question catches me off guard. In an instant, I am transported back to a childhood memory. Voices outside the tent rouse me awake. It's a chilly summer morning in the Boundary Waters Canoe Area wilderness of Minnesota. My sister Stephanie is still sound asleep next to me. I stretch luxuriously, enjoying the warmth of my goose-down sleeping bag while remembering how hot I would be waking up back home in Texas right now. Natural air conditioning, my dad calls this northern climate. As my groggy mind clears, I identify the voices as belonging to my dad and my younger brother, Jonathan. My older brother, Neil, is already at college, so he didn't come along for this trip. They're saying something about bears. I put my shoes on and step out of the tent to see that they are investigating giant paw prints all around our tents. Dad explains that this is why it's always so important to string our food up in the trees like we do. He reminds us of the importance of selecting the right size of tree limbs that are strong enough to hold the food bags, but too fragile for the bears to climb out on. He also makes a point to reiterate that we should never eat in our tents because the bears will smell the food and want to come in. And that is that. Mom cooks up the fish Jonathan caught this morning, and we enjoy some freshly picked blueberries my younger sisters Abigail and Ruth found nearby. I add a few pieces of dried yogurt from my backpack. It's my favorite, so I've bartered most of my beef jerky for my siblings' shares of dried yogurt to be able to have some at every meal. We break camp and load up for another full day of gorgeous views, untouched wild country, canoeing, and portaging. It will be 6 more days before we see another human. And that was how it was growing up. We took these adventures every single summer, backpacking and canoeing through the wilderness. We ate food Mom had prepared from scratch for weeks prior to the trip, drinking water straight out of the streams and lakes as we went. I didn't worry about bears or giardia or anything. Dad would protect us, and Mom would make sure we were never hungry. When we weren't on our annual summer trip, as we called it, we lived pioneer style, way past the outskirts of town. The various modest farmhouses I grew up in always had a small boys' room, occupancy 2, a small girls' room, occupancy 4, and a third, even tinier bedroom for my parents. We always only had one bathroom, no air conditioning, and no TV. We girls were required to wear dresses to school. We raised our own food with a large flock of chickens, a milk cow, and a massive garden of over an acre, within which each child was required to plant and care for their own crops. I planted a lot of zinnias because they were hardy and required very little care. My parents were avidly health conscious. We were not allowed to eat sugar, white flour, or other refined and processed foods. Mom and Dad had every home remedy imaginable to cure any sickness. In fact, I never once went to the doctor during my entire childhood. Dad even acted as midwife to deliver the last 4 of their children. When, as an adult, I decided to hire a midwife to attend my own home births, I felt so over the top. Dad was the head of the house. Mom submitted and supported him. We kids were obedient and knew the business end of Big Brown, the paddle that delivered justice and kept us all in line. My parents never raised their voices at us or each other. We simply did what we were told, and that was that. My life was orderly, predictable, and safe. I knew the rules. I knew how to stay out of trouble. I knew what I could secretly get away with if I really wanted to. I was in control. It made sense. Mr. Letch clears his throat and taps his pen impatiently on the shiny desktop, jolting me back to the present. How did I get here? I hastily repeat. I collect my thoughts for another moment. How did I get here? I'm hussied up, trying to garner some sympathy from a greasy, high-powered divorce attorney who would take my body without hesitation if he knew he could get away with it. I know how to get the kind of attention needed to get a job done. I've been practicing that for years now. I'm also used up, desperate, and terrified that my son is gone forever. It didn't happen all at once, I venture hesitantly, no trace of my thin veneer of self-confidence. Suddenly, I must justify my decisions so this lawyer will believe that I'm worth his time. I don't know how to do that. This guy will obviously not be the one to help me. I conclude with a weak attempt. It's not like it happened all at once. I guess it was really just one tiny step at a time. And now, my dear reader, I invite you along on my journey of 1,000 steps so that you may understand how I got here. If this chapter finds you at rock bottom and you're ready to turn your difficult situation into an opportunity for redemption, please go to theuntherapist.com/chapter 1 and download the study guide. Your timing is perfect and your healing is ready to happen. Chapter 2, Moms Don't Get to Have Their Own Lives. Chapter framework. Old belief before Untherapy. I am a product of my upbringing. I must rebel against those things I did not like about my childhood in order to avoid them. Despite my best efforts, it is likely I will still end up accidentally becoming my mother, and not in a good way. Because I was born a woman, I am doomed to a life of servitude to the patriarchy. The Untherapy perspective. We learn our foundational ideas about feminine nature from the influences of our childhood primary caregivers. Every person carries a mixture of both being or feminine energy and doing or masculine energy. Therefore, our core feminine programming can come from both women and men and may include anyone who had a significant impact on us, not just parental figures. Our understanding of such being energy qualities as creation, intuition, community, sensuality, and collaboration become solidified by the time we are about 5 years of age. As children, our brains naturally accept this specific core programming as normal. Unless we learn how to change it, we unconsciously perpetuate and reinforce this unique programming for better or worse for the rest of our lives. Once we become aware that we can change this programming, however, we are free to remove any obstacles to creating our deepest desires. And the quote for this chapter is, "She was powerful not because she wasn't scared, but because she went on so strongly despite the fear." Atticus. Want to come drink some wine with me? My mom is pouring 2 generous glasses of her delicious homemade blackberry wine as if she already knows my answer. I'm caught off guard for a moment. Wine and beer are a normal part of our household, and we kids always get a sip when we ask for it. But a glass that size? Dad is in Russia on a business trip, and the rest of my siblings are already in bed. In all my 16 years, she has never asked me to drink wine with her. I glance around. Me? I ask for clarification. She leans in with a knowing look. I found your diary and I have some questions. Let's talk. My mind seizes with terror as my heart sinks with a thud. I'm toast. Dad grounded me for 2 months when he found out I was bumming Little Debbie snacks off my friends at school. Pretty sure I'm destined for the firing squad on this one. I'm scrambling in vain to remember what exactly I even wrote in that stupid diary. It definitely involves my recent party escapades with boys on the weekends when I visit my brother at college. How am I going to get out of this one? Mom puts a gentle arm around me. You're not in trouble. Come on. She grabs the wine. She lights a candle on the dresser and we arrange ourselves cross-legged on her bed like a couple of best friends at a sleepover. I'm torn between this is so cool and I am definitely dead. I take a deep breath and decide to be as honest as I can. At least Dad is on the other side of the world. It makes the promise of impending doom a little bit more manageable, at least for now. She takes a big sip of wine and begins. What did you mean when you wrote that you love sleeping with guys? Oh, that? I laugh with nervous relief. Maybe it's not your first preference for your daughters, but I feel solid about it. Do you even know what my friends are doing? I assume she does not know, since I have never had a conversation about sex with either of my parents. I saw them holding hands walking into church one time, and my sister and I almost died of embarrassment. I have never seen them kiss. I explain that I just enjoy the closeness of cuddling. It's nice and makes me feel less alone. Mom lets out an audible sigh of relief. It bothers me that she doesn't know me better. Has she not noticed how much I care about being a good girl? I explain my makeout protocol. When I meet a new guy I like, I have the talk with him. I start by explaining that I am a virgin and will not be changing tonight. That will not be changing tonight or any time before I get married. I clearly define the rules and boundaries and inform him that if he doesn't push past any of those, we can cuddle and sleep together for the rest of the night. Works like a charm every time. I reassure Mom that no guy has ever tried to push the limits. I do not elaborate on the exact physical boundaries that I currently enforce. I do not go into detail about the gradual expansion of these boundaries over the past year since my first kiss. I just emphasize the important part. I am a virgin, and that will not change until my wedding night. I'm taking every precaution to ensure that. Since this is the first time I've ever shared any personal feelings about boys with my mom, we have some catching up to do. We drink our wine and giggle, talking late into the night. She wants to know more about who I have a crush on, which annoys me because she doesn't seem to comprehend that I don't want to be tied down. I don't want a boyfriend and I'm not looking. I don't like the idea of being with the same one every time. I've tried it here and there. He always starts to get possessive and controlling. I never make it past 2 weeks, a point at which I unceremoniously dump him like last week's garbage and move on. I've been referred to as a man-eater more than once. I don't care. I like to be in charge. She wants to know why I feel like that. I don't know how to tell her that I don't want to end up like her, with no freedom and no personal identity. I don't have the heart to admit that I don't respect her. I don't ever see her doing what she really wants. I don't even know what she would want, even if she could have it. All she does is take care of her husband and her kids. I will not be caught in that trap. No, thank you. In the flickering candlelight, Mom's face looks softer and younger. I don't know this side of her. Normally, I would be too uncomfortable to see her this vulnerable, but the wine has softened my hard edges. In this moment, I can imagine her like me, with a head full of dreams and a heart full of hope. She seems so real, so normal, just like a regular person. I share more details about my ideal type and who I hope will ask me to the church prom, not as my boyfriend, I remind her, but just as a standalone date. I almost feel sad for her. Does she ever get to do this? She doesn't have any girlfriends that I know of. She never goes anywhere by herself to do something just because she wants to. But I don't say any of that. I don't want to risk spoiling the moment. I flash back to a couple weeks ago when she was fitting me for a new school dress. She has been sewing clothes for me my whole life. 100% cotton because it's natural, and the Old Testament says not to mix fabrics. I love going to the sewing store to select the pattern and fabric with her. I wince with hot shame as I remember the disdain and anger in my voice as I barked orders. This waistline is gapping. See how fat it makes me look? You're going to have to take in that dart in the back. It makes my butt look way too big. It's puckering. Mom, I told you I wanted a fitted skirt. I recall her cold, determined eyes. She just took my abuse. She didn't even argue with me. Her sewing machine light glowed late into the night as she fixed her mistakes. In the morning, my new dress was hanging beside my bed, perfectly pressed, with a handwritten note from the ironing fairy pinned to the shoulder. As Mom rinses our wine glasses, I head to bed. I can't shake the haunting realization. I'm a bad daughter. I'm mean to my mom, and she doesn't deserve it. I'm going to really try to be more kind to her. A week later, Dad grounds me for what I've been doing on the weekends. I'm not allowed to visit my brother anymore. Never mind, I think. Mom betrayed me. I mean, I want her to be happy, but not at my expense. I knew I couldn't trust her. I will never keep a diary again. That way, what I do in secret can't ever be proven. I am in charge. I do what I want. It is not safe to talk about it with anyone, and they wouldn't understand anyway. If this chapter puts you in touch with your mommy issues and you're ready to get clear on next steps toward dealing with them, download the study guide at theuntherapist.com/chapter 2. Chapter 3, The Dad is Always Right. Chapter Framework, Old Belief Before Untherapy. I am afraid of male authority figures in my life, of which God is one, as they carry the inborn power to judge me. Their judgment determines my worth as a human. The letter of the law is paramount. To get what I want, I can just bend the spirit of the law to meet my needs. The untherapy perspective. Every person carries a mixture of both doing energy, commonly referred to as masculine, and being energy, commonly referred to as feminine. Contrary to patriarchal ideologies, doing energy is not inherently superior to being energy. Both are essential for thriving. Each individual's proper balance is only discovered by pursuing our deepest desires with faith and courage. Our personal equilibrium is not determined or limited by our gender. Our understanding of such doing energy qualities as risk-taking, adventure, survival, and mental reasoning becomes solidified by the time we are around 5 years old. At this formative age, our brainwaves are in receive mode and naturally accept that what we experience as normal. If we discover that we are out of alignment with the being and doing energy balance that is right for us, we can release restrictive programming to restore internal harmony. The quote for this chapter is, "The moment God is figured out with nice, neat lines and definitions, we are no longer dealing with God." Rob Bell. Mom and Dad were high school sweethearts. As far as I know, they were each other's first and only love. I never saw them fight or even so much as raise their voices to each other. In a disagreement, Dad always had the final word, per God's orders. Mom always acquiesced as the submissive, weaker vessel. This relationship seemed straightforward and simple. As a child, I never once worried about them quitting on each other. I learned to be an exceptionally good liar growing up. There were so many rules, and my dad was consistent and strict. I hated getting spankings, so I went to great lengths to avoid punishment. I don't remember ever offering an honest, uncoerced confession during my entire childhood. By the time I was 10, I could hold a poker face without altering my breathing while looking directly into the most intimidating gaze I knew, my father's piercing blue eyes. I honed this skill for years. It was the primary way I navigated my various personas. Good little Christian girl at home, super smart student at school, and party girl on the weekends. And then one day when I was 17, I decided to try the truth. "Dad," my question rouses him from intense focus. It's late and the rest of the house is already asleep. He's in the middle of writing his next book, and I know he writes at night to avoid interruptions. 5 kids still living at home in a 900 square foot house means silence is rare. I stay up late for the same reason. Senior year honors classes come with a heavy homework load, and I get most of it done between 10 p.m. and midnight. I'm on track to graduate at the top of my class with a full academic scholarship to the university of my choice. His tiny office, just large enough for a desk, is lined on all sides with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Hundreds of volumes, neatly organized by topic, fill every available shelf. This library represents all the things Dad cares about most: soils, including his textbooks from grad school and his PhD dissertation, God, health, religion, marriage, nature, pioneer life, farming, child rearing. I used to love to stare at the rows and marvel at how all that knowledge from all these books could fit into one brain, his brain. He finishes the line he is writing, pauses for a moment, and then looks up at me. Yes, he queries. In all my 17 years, I have never felt more weight riding on an individual moment than I do now. I'm 3 months from graduation, and lately I've been thinking a lot about what it will be like once I moved on to college. I've never spent a day alone in my life. I have no idea what it feels like to be by myself. I keep wondering if there's anything I should still learn before I go. I have decided it is time to crack the enigma that is my father. I have never really understood how he thinks. He's always been larger than life. His word is the law of our family, God's law. I have begun to consider how that will carry over into my life as an independent adult. Will I still be able to follow all of his rules without him physically around to enforce them? I very much want to be a good girl. Every night of my life for over 17 years now, he has gathered the family to read the Bible. I know how God expects his chosen people to behave. Although I take some liberties with the interpretation of some of the more inconvenient rules, I maintain a strictly obedient persona. As far as Dad is concerned, I am the model of a godly young lady. I've had a few minor indiscretions recently, but I've paid my debt to the divine in the form of temporary loss of privilege, and I'm back on the straight and narrow now. But what about authentic connection? This is the ethereal concept I'm searching for in this moment. I don't have words for it, and I don't even know what it would look like. God has always been a disassociated, faraway concept full of power, judgment, anger, and punishment. I don't know how to express the feeling that I'm missing something big, something important. I want to find it before I go on to the next chapter of my life. For the past 2 weeks, I've been planning and rehearsing different versions of the conversation I just initiated. Now is my moment. I have Dad's attention. I force myself to speak. I'm scared of you. It wasn't exactly what I planned on saying, but honestly, it was the most efficient summary of my truth. And now it's outside my mind and hanging in the air between us like a dense fog. My heart is pounding so loud in my ears, I'm not sure I'll be able to hear his response. I hold my breath. This is it. My moment of glory when I throw caution to the wind and do the bravest thing I know how to do. We are maybe, dare I hope, mere moments from bridging a vast cavern of emotional distance. We will hug and cry tears of relief and joy. He will reassure me that who I am at my core is legitimate and even perfect. I have nothing to fear, and he, just like God, loves me no matter what. He looks at me searchingly with those piercing blue eyes I know so well. After another pregnant pause, he replies, "That's silly," and promptly returns to his writing. I know intuitively what this silly means. I started noticing around 5 years old that I had too much energy for my dad's comfort. I was too boisterous and loved people and attention too much. For peace of mind and stress relief, Dad extolled the virtues of meditating in nature alone. But I felt best when I was in the biggest crowd of people I could find, preferably the center of their attention. The number one reprimand I received as a child was, "Girls, don't be silly." With 4 daughters, he was constantly reminding us to contain our exuberant outbursts. We weren't allowed to squeal or scream or giggle uncontrollably. I took this to mean there was something wrong with me. Every time I was happy, these responses just spilled out of my body without warning. As I've grown into my teenage years, I've learned to control my joy and limit my expressions of it to times when I'm not around Dad. Hearing the word silly in the context of this most important conversation instantly quells any hope for connection. My heart sinks with an unceremonious thud. When I was 4, Dad welded a bunch of recycled metal pipes together to make us kids a jungle gym. As a child, it was one of my very favorite places to play. Many times I would swing too hard and too high, lose my grip, and land flat on my back, knocking the wind out of my lungs. The first time it happened, I was sure it was the end. Over time, though, I learned that I was not, in fact, going to die in that moment. Just because I could not breathe when I fell didn't mean I would never breathe again. I learned to wait, relax, and allow my breath to return. It always did. This moment feels just like that. I swung too hard and too high. My hopeful heart has fallen from a great height. The impact has stolen the air from my lungs, and I feel like I'm going to die. I stand in the doorway for a few more long moments, waiting for my lungs to work again. There it is. I feel the air begin to return. I suck in a long, slow, silent breath. See, I tell myself, you did not die. You survived, and now you know. I shuffle my leaden legs off to bed and surrender defeat. In this moment, the truth is clear. Who I am is bad. I must try harder to be good. Even when I move away, God is always watching. I must remember not to be silly, not to do what comes naturally for me. It is not safe to be vulnerable with Dad or God. If this chapter stirred up your daddy issues in a way that compels you to do something about it, I humbly offer the Chapter 3 study guide available at theuntherapist.com/chapter 3. Chapter 4, Willpower Warrior. Chapter framework, old belief before Untherapy. The most important way to be good is to force myself to abide by the rules no matter what. The greater my sacrifice and the harder I work, the greater my reward. It is absolutely critical to suppress my own desires in favor of others, especially the men in my life, which includes God. I apply willpower to achieve absolute compliance. The Untherapy perspective. We have an inherent need to feel in control of our life circumstances. It feels dangerous to go against the core programming we grew up with, especially if that programming taught us to ignore our own inner desires. If we consistently practice subverting our desires in favor of external rules, especially in the name of fear and/or survival, we have immense ability to convince ourselves that misery is our birthright. Struggle becomes normalized and feels safer than simplicity and ease. Because life is actually designed for our growth, healing, and thriving, we are wired to release the need to struggle and return to a more natural state of flow. And the quote for this chapter is, "It is only when a woman surrenders her life to her husband, reveres and worships him, and is willing to serve him, that she becomes really beautiful to him." Maribel Morgan. It's the beginning of my senior year of high school, and Dad is discussing the new date for the end of the world. I have heard these doomsday predictions throughout my entire childhood. Every few years, he announces the new date for Armageddon. Although it is terrifying to hear how the world is going to explode into death flames, Dad always reminds us not to be afraid. We are part of God's small chosen group that gets to go to a safe place while all the heathen burn for their sins. I decide that if Dad can protect us from bears that tromp around our tents at night, hopefully he knows what he's talking about here too. Each of those dates has come and gone with nary an explanation, just a modified prediction pushed into the future. This current one is set to happen at some point in the year 1992. We can't be exactly sure because the Bible says no one is allowed to know the day or the hour. Wait, what? That's only a few months away, and 1992 is my year of freedom. Right after graduation in May, I'm moving away to college. Will I still be protected? And more importantly, am I going to die before I get to have sex? Thankfully, and despite battling rampant fear and anxiety for the rest of the year, 1992 passes successfully into 1993. Phew, dodged that bullet. From this point forward, I vow to avoid asking my dad for the updated schedule of global annihilation. College is an eye-opener. I share an apartment with a shy roommate who is rarely home. For the first time in my life, I experience being physically alone in a space. I get asked on a lot of dates, and I'm surprised to learn that my dad doesn't allow me to has lost its power. I fumble for ways to say no without offending, which always comes out sounding like yes. One of these dates ends with the guy cross-legged on my couch and my head in his lap. He insists on giving me a scalp massage that will blow my mind. So I lie stiff as a board while the odor of his stinky feet curls my nostril hairs. Although the massage does nothing for my body, the whole experience certainly impresses upon me the value of employing a simple but firm no thank you when I'm not attracted to someone. I still date around and indulge in plenty of makeout sessions followed by all-night cuddling. It feels good to come into my power and make my own life choices. I know I'm banking on the letter of the law, but as long as I do not have intercourse, I am a virgin. I am in good standing with God. I'm proud of myself for making the transition to self-monitoring adult with relative ease. I continue to be an excellent student, maintaining all my scholarships and a 4.0 GPA in my elite honors program. I have no clear career path, but I figure worst case, I'm setting myself up for success at the graduate level. By now, it's Christmas break of my freshman year at UT Austin. I am faithfully attending the local Austin congregation of the same church I grew up in. I'm still not looking for a serious relationship. But when an eligible bachelor starts attending, I say yes to a date. Brad has just moved to town from out of state and was also raised in this religion. He's 6 feet tall with curly black hair, bright blue eyes, and a weak chin. He's 4 years older than me and installs HVAC systems for a living. Brad strikes me as average in all ways, but he's sweet, interesting, and attentive. I say yes to another date. We go over our sexual boundary protocol, which has maintained its integrity unchallenged through my first 9 months as an independent woman. I kiss him. It isn't terrible. By the third date, he's pushing my limits. I reiterate my boundaries. I am a virgin. That will not be changing tonight or any time before I get married. There is a subtle pressure every time I'm around him. I can't put my finger on it. It feels like I somehow owe him something that I don't quite know how to give. I've never felt this pressure from any of the casual dates I've had over the years. I don't know how to define it, so I chalk it up to the fact that he's my first official boyfriend. Or maybe it has something to do with God's plan for my life. Since Brad is the first church guy I've dated, there is a developing unspoken sense that we have a future together. I have always known I would marry a member. To maintain the purity of God's chosen people, we are only allowed to marry other members of the same religion. But I brush off the thought for now. Marriage isn't even on my radar at the moment. I'm in school and career mode right now. A month in, we have exchanged those 3 little words, I love you. I've never been in love before, so I have no reason to doubt that this is it. Almost a year of living on my own has taught me the value of being honest. Without the fear of punishment from my dad, I have discovered that I like how it feels to be vulnerable with my friends. When I tell lies now, I feel that old familiar depression from my childhood. I make a promise to myself that I will always be honest with Brad, especially when I'm scared. I don't ever want to feel silly for having a hard conversation again. I gathered the courage to ask Brad about the pile of unopened mail on his kitchen counter. 6 weeks in, he lets me open it. I have zero financial acumen, so I educate myself, making payment arrangements with all his creditors and begin repairing his credit. By summer, we've moved his sister and mom into my apartment from out of state. I tell him it's because I want to help them get on their feet. In truth, I want an excuse for him to keep his own apartment. Now his mom is around to keep us honest, and I share a bedroom with his sister. This makes it much easier for me to resist his constant pressure to go all the way. Fall classes start, and he's complaining that I care more about school than him. I let my grades slip for the first time in my life. I try not to resent him. I want to be a good girlfriend. His sister and I are getting close. Delilah is close to my age and a lost soul who battles chronic physical and mental health issues. Acting as her therapist makes me feel better about my own quandary. One particularly difficult night, Delilah decides I'm safe enough to trust with her darkest secret. She takes a slow breath as I squeeze her hand encouragingly. She forces the words out. My brother raped me. My hand flinches away like she's a hot stove. Just like my childhood jungle gym, I've swung too hard and too high. My heart falls flat on its back with a bone-chilling thud. I wait for my breath to return while my thoughts race ahead. Could she mean a different brother? How old was he when this happened? Can she get him thrown in jail? My childhood did not include anything sexual, not even hand-holding, and least of all incest or molestation. I die 1,000 deaths before I catch my breath. Without revealing why, I call I call Brad and ask him to come over. It doesn't occur to me to care if Delilah wants to be in the same room with him right now. I give their mom a quick rundown and she starts hysterically wailing about being a failure. When Brad arrives, I meet him at the door with a cold question. Did you rape your sister? All 3 begin screaming and crying, blaming, demanding, justifying. I witness the scene in slow motion, their voices echoing through my brain as I dissolve into the background. Suddenly, for the first time in my life, I get the urge to run. Without thinking, I bolt for the front door. This is before cell phones, and I don't have a car, so I duck into the stairway of the next apartment building and knock on a neighbor's door. I borrow her phone to call one of my professors. We coordinated a study group last semester, and he's the first person who pops into my head who would be willing to put me up for the night without asking too many questions. I just need a little space to figure out my next step. I hide out in the neighbor's apartment until my professor gets there. As luck would have it, as he arrives to pick me up, my professor crosses paths with Brad, who is searching the complex to locate me. The professor says it's none of his business, but if that's the guy I'm running away from, maybe I should reconsider. He seems like a good guy. He was desperate to find you, and he seemed really upset at the thought of losing you. I take this as a sign from God that Brad really does need me, and I am meant to help him. He's my project, and I can't turn my back on him now. I thank my professor for his kindness, then I turn around and walk back into Brad's life. I double down on my commitment to this relationship. I keep supportive scripture references in the forefront of my mind. Love covers a multitude of sins. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. He who is without sin, cast the first stone. I moved to a new apartment with a roommate from the university so I can escape Brad's family and put the past behind us. I still have my 5-year plan: complete my degree, establish my career, then consider settling down. In that order. He's more ready than ever for marriage. I'm less ready. I take him home to meet my parents, and I'm even brave enough to hold his hand in front of my dad. My dad reprimands me later. If he only knew how hard I'm working to maintain purity, maybe he would be proud of me instead. He also says he doesn't think Brad is a good match for me. That makes me want to prove him wrong. I'm already invested so much in this relationship. I imagine that for once, God is on my side rather than Dad's. I avoid drinking alcohol around Brad. I send him home every night, since even cuddling on the couch with my roommate nearby leads to close calls. This mounting pressure drives me to research. I need relief, some supportive guidance, or maybe a mentor. Nobody has answers for a good little Christian girl who is trapped in a perfectly acceptable relationship with the right guy and doesn't know how to get him to hold out. I find a book called The Total Woman by Maribel Morgan, which promises to teach me all about being a godly wife. I consume the pages with gusto, eager to discover answers. This book becomes my new Bible. Within its pages, I find the secret manual for the perfect Christian woman's life. This must be the same book my mother read so many years ago. I feel like I'm peeking through a private window into Mom's unrevealed life. Each chapter discloses new behind-the-scenes wisdom that surely accounts for her unwavering gracious support and compliance all those years. Mrs. Morgan promises that all I must do to give my husband my undivided, unconditional support. Mrs. Morgan promises that all I must do is give my husband my undivided, unconditional support and attention, and all my deepest longings will be fully satisfied for the rest of my life. Then I get to the bottom of page 123. Your husband wants you to want him sexually. He wants you to enjoy lovemaking as much as he does. If you fail in this area, he is devastated. Down inside, he feels he is an utter failure. Believe in him and tell him so. Let him know he's your special project in life. The heavens part, the angels burst into chorus. That's it. Brad's unrelenting pressure is the sole result of me not giving him sex. Oh, how it all makes so much sense now. I already know he's my special project in life. I've patched up his credit. I've played therapist to his mom and sister. I've helped him overcome childhood trauma. I bolster his ego on the daily, rearranging my priorities to fit in and around his, so he will always feel important and useful and special. The reason none of this is helping him feel better is because I refuse to have sex with him. Now that the light has been switched on, my path forward is clear. As I complete the final pages of The Total Woman, a singular purpose resounds in my heart. I want to be a total woman. I need to marry Brad as soon as possible. Like a perfect old-fashioned gentleman, Brad invites my dad to dinner. Over steak and mashed potatoes, he asks Dad for my hand in marriage. We've decided to throw together a quick wedding over the winter semester break so it doesn't interfere with my classes. Dad is very concerned about the rush. It never occurs to me that he might be worried about pregnancy. I'm just interested in getting the show on the road sooner rather than later. The sooner intercourse can commence, the sooner my pressure can be lifted, and I can have my happily ever after with the one God has chosen for me. Dad does not voice his actual concern. I do not voice mine. Dad gives his blessing, and we set the date. The simple afternoon ceremony passes in a blur. I remember to pause for dramatic effect and speak the or poorer and in sickness at a noticeably louder volume than the other vows before God and these witnesses. I am reassuring my almost husband that no matter what we go through, no matter how hard it gets, we are going to be just fine. We are about to have officially sanctioned, God-ordained, legal marital sex. I remember Maribel Morgan's promise. I am 19 years old and about to become a total woman. I gaze into Brad's eyes as we say I do. My dear, sweet love, I think to myself, sex is guaranteed to fix your every problem. No more fear, anger, or depression for you. All the while, the act of giving you my body freely, eagerly, and unconditionally will magically reward me with heavenly bliss and unending desire for more. I shiver with anticipation. Just outside of town, we check into a little hotel that will host the most important night of my life. I rush into the tiny bathroom and hastily change into the blue lace negligee I received as a wedding shower gift. The material is scratchy and the fasteners at the crotch require an advanced yoga pose to navigate. My shaky fingers manage 2 of the 3 snaps, and I finally abandon the undertaking for the sake of time and ease of access. I stand up straight, drawing in a deep breath to calm my nerves. I meet my gaze in the little bathroom mirror. Despite the unflattering hue of the fluorescent light flickering overhead, my wedding makeup complements a face full of anticipation. With a coy smile, I whisper to my reflection, "Now go out there and become a total woman." Brad is already lying in bed, the covers pulled halfway over his naked body. We have been naked together before, but it has been several months. Too many close calls, so I established a must remain clothed while making out rule to keep us honest. Traversing the 10 feet from the bathroom to the bed, it occurs to me that I'm bridging the chasm between what I must not ever let myself think about doing and what I must now always want to do. The span is not wide enough to complete the transition. The clock on the bedside table reads 9:38 p.m. as I slip into my side and pull the covers up to my neck. I feel chilly and stiff. I've been looking forward to the moment that is about to happen for as long as I can remember. What is wrong with me? He seems nervous too. You ready? I smile with mock confidence. He nods meaningfully and climbs on top of me. I fumble with the snaps and open my legs, breathing deeply and willing my body to relax. He finds his way in with relative ease. I wait for some sort of distinct sensation of my hymen breaking, but nothing registers. It's over before I can settle in. I grab a towel from the bathroom and wipe up. As I climb back in bed, the clock reads 9:47 p.m. I lie still for a few moments, letting the magnitude of the moment wash over me. I am no longer a virgin. I'm a woman now. I am Brad's wife. It is official. There is no going back. My thoughts race as I search for my new foundational truths. So many rules and boundaries are no longer needed. So much resistance, care, and vigilance can be relegated to the past. I don't have to be a good girl anymore. I breathe a sigh of relief. This will be easier. Brad turns to me with a broad smile and a wink. His confidence seems to be building. Ready for round 2? He lasts longer the second time, and after that, he wants to try different positions. After round 3, I tell him I'm getting sore and tired. He ignores my suggestion for a break, eagerly asking for more. I listen for inner guidance. I hear Maribel Morgan's words. Your husband wants you to want him sexually. He wants you to enjoy lovemaking as much as he does. If you fail in this area, he is devastated. We go again and again. With a grateful hug, he finally rolls over and falls asleep. His gentle snores belie the gravity of this experience. My awareness floats up to the ceiling, and from this vantage point, I watch him peacefully sleeping next to my worn-out body. Is this what it feels like to be a total woman? Have I succeeded? I shift my legs gently, wincing at the burning sensation of my freshly torn flesh. What is my life now? Is this it? As I methodically review the familiar pages of Maribel Morgan's book in my mind, a realization creeps over me. She assumed I would enjoy the sex. There was no chapter included about what to do if I didn't. There must be something wrong with me. Or maybe I misunderstood my role. Maybe my pleasure was never the point. Never mind, it's too late now. This is what I signed up for. Brad is my special project in life, and I have just taken the ultimate blood oath to devote my life to assuring his success and happiness. If this chapter stirred up some deep issues around willpowering your way into heaven or otherwise forcing yourself to be good enough to be accepted, while I have you here, may I suggest digging a little deeper? The study guide for chapter 4 is all about it. You can download it at theuntherapist.com/chapter 4. Chapter 5, Victim Vibes. Chapter Framework, Old Belief before Untherapy. My ability to enjoy life is not important. My value comes from my performance as a wife and a mother. As a woman, I am not competent enough to be allowed to have an opinion on important issues like my own body, sexual pleasure, loyalty, or parenthood. I exist to meet the needs of others, and if that comes at my expense, at least I get bonus points for martyrdom. The untherapy perspective, because life is naturally optimized for our ideal growth, thriving, and happiness, to actively resist this flow is to swim upstream. The tremendous amount of energy it takes to reinforce false beliefs, ignore our intuition, and choose harmful options leaves us feeling exhausted, depressed, invisible, and angry at outside influences. There is nothing sacred about using the Bible to manipulate and control people, even ourselves. Giving up our power of choice is, in fact, also a choice. If we tolerate bad behavior long enough, we might even convince ourselves that it's not, in fact, all that bad. Negative feelings like fear, doubt, and anger are just as useful as positive ones. They draw attention to areas that need healing. As we process and release these emotions, we create space for our own development while also giving others permission to do the same. And the quote for this chapter is, "Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as also Christ is the head of the church, and he is the Savior of the body." Ephesians 5:22 and 23, New King James Version. As I settle into married life, I habituate to the feeling of disappointment. I teach myself to gauge my success according to Brad's happiness. I decide to consider my lack of sex drive as a blessing. It makes sense to me logically that maybe a woman shouldn't get too carried away with the lusts of the flesh anyway. That seems to be a characteristic more befitting of the male gender. The rules are pretty straightforward. Always be ready, always say yes, always be attentive, focus only on the positive, stroke his ego and his body as often as possible, convince him he is an excellent lover. As I turn 20 and begin my junior year of college, I take a job as a secretary to help out financially. I also discover I am pregnant. Apparently, olive oil breaks down the integrity of latex condoms and is therefore not a recommended lubricant. Who reads the warnings on a condom box? My 5-year plan is officially dead. The choice to drop out of school is easy enough. I never did figure out a compelling career path, and it seems to be a moot point now that I'm in family mode. Brad is oddly nervous about my choice. I reassure him I will never regret it. I know deep in my heart that I'm doing the right thing, the godly thing. Why does a woman even need a career? I am baffled as I remember the immature girl I was a year ago, prioritizing my education so highly. Why would a woman want to invest that much time and energy into something that would take her away from her husband and kids? My mom had it right all along. I meet with my professors to inform them of my decision. They plead with me to reconsider, reminding me of how well I have been doing and what a bright future I have ahead of me. I brush away their lack of support. They just don't understand. I return the unused money to the scholarship committees that have been funding my education for going on 3 years now. I square my shoulders, hire a midwife, and prepare for life as a mother. Giving birth is a life-changing experience. I go into labor at 11 p.m. with contractions starting just 5 minutes apart. I remember my personal commitment to be kind to Brad so he doesn't feel left out or attacked. I will not be one of those unseemly wives who screams and blames her husband for her labor pains. As I ride the waves of acute labor pain, I do my best to lovingly reassure him that I am just fine. My midwife, Susie, guides me through the birthing experience with skill and ease as her apprentice provides additional support and care. Mom is here too. She has even brought her famous homemade date-filled cookies for a special post-labor pick-me-up. How did she do this 6 times, and how did she trust Dad to be her only assistant? I look around the bed and imagine how it would feel if just Brad were there. It's a scary and lonely thought. 3 hours later, Gideon has entered the world as our firstborn son. It takes the rest of the night to get all cleaned up, nursed, and settled in for some rest. I am enjoying one of Mom's amazing cookies when it occurs to me that no one ever did this for her. Just then, Brad's 6 a.m. alarm goes off. I pop up to make his lunch for work. Oh no, young lady, midwife Susie insists. You won't be going anywhere for a while. The reality of juggling motherhood and wifely duties occurs to me for the first time. Mom stays for a week to help. She handles everything from washing cloth diapers to making Brad's dinner. I am free to master the art of nursing and take cat naps every time Gideon sleeps. When it is time for Mom to leave, I stand on my apartment balcony and watch her drive away, clutching my new baby tightly to my chest. I am overwhelmed at the enormity of this new task. Can I do this? Can I be the mother that this little boy deserves? Gideon is the new love of my life. I didn't know I could adore another human being so much. Brad has a better job now selling HVAC products. So with a bit of strict budgeting and coupon clipping, I'm able to be a stay-at-home mom. It is bliss. I finally understand how my mom could give her whole life to this. Around Gideon's first birthday, Brad starts expressing jealousy over the bond I have with our son. Just like when we were first dating, there is once again an ever-present unspoken pressure. Brad wants more from me, more of me, only this time I have nothing more to give. He becomes more pensive, distant, and agitated. I'm consumed with being a good wife and mother, and I'm baffled at his mental state. I beg him to open up to me, and he finally accuses me of having an affair. His theory is that a man is coming over during the day while he is at work to have sex with me. His proof is the toilet seat in the guest bathroom. It's always in the up position. I cackle with equal parts disbelief and relief. Poor Brad and his overactive imagination. Gideon wears cloth diapers, remember? I explain how I rinse them in the toilet with the seat up to get rid of the solids before putting them in the washing machine. I point at my unkempt hair and the disheveled t-shirt with breast milk stains that hang sloppily over my stretch marks and widened hips. Do you really think I'm spending my day with another man? I am beside myself with incredulity. What have I done to elicit such paranoia? I add 2 more items to my daily to-do list. 1, periodic calls to his work to reassure him I'm thinking only of him, and 2, give him more sex. When Gideon is almost 2, we decide to have a second child. We both come from large families and don't want Gideon growing up without siblings. I'm secretly convinced that this will break Brad out of his depression and resolve the growing pressure that I'm feeling to give him more of something I don't have. Maybe a daughter this time. Maybe that will be just the thing to make him happy. During this second pregnancy, I experienced none of the attentive care Brad gave me during the first one. He is restless and uneasy, like there's an itch he can't scratch. After much prodding, he confesses that our sex life is uninspiring, which has caused him to sink into chronic depression. I redouble my efforts in the bedroom, challenging myself to say yes to all his desires with less hesitation and more agreeability. Brad wants me to shave all my pubic hair. After weeks of intense resistance, I cannot find a valid reason to deny his desire, so I decide to take the plunge. Turns out Brad was right. There is no law in the Bible against it, and I am not, in fact, struck down by lightning. Through consistent, intentional, repeated practice, I overcome my resistance to positions other than missionary. It would have been easier if they had more spiritual names than doggy and reverse cowgirl. Then I'm back to the Bible to find a decree against anal sex. When I come up empty, I call a sex info hotline from the phone book. The kind lady on the other end assures me it is perfectly safe and normal, but I should only do it if I want to. But I'm married, I explain. I hang up the phone and decide I must force myself to comply. I remember that I am honoring God by honoring my husband. I recall the martyrs of the Bible. This is a small sacrifice, really. When we wear out our new repertoire, Brad introduces the concept of swinging, yet another term I've never heard before. This one means the practice of engaging in group sex or the swapping of sexual partners within a group, especially on a habitual basis. I don't bother looking this one up in the Bible. Brad has chosen this. Why should I resist him? The idea of sex with someone besides my husband is terrifying. The two paramount rules in my life juxtaposed for an epic showdown. Number one, I must please God. Number two, I must please my husband. There's only one way to reconcile this quandary. God must be calling me to deeper submission through my husband. I blow the dust off the old Knaves topical Bible that Dad gifted me as a child for a more effective Bible study. I conduct an in-depth exploration of the God-ordained role of a wife. My conclusion is to take the Bible literally. My husband is my leader, just like Christ leads the church, and he is the savior of the body. I certainly need to be saved. Therefore, it follows that I must trust his guidance in exactly the same way that the church is expected to trust the guidance of God. My decision notwithstanding, the years I have spent cultivating intentional control over my sexual desires are not easily undone. We start spending a lot of time with another couple from church, and Brad tells me they want to have sex with us. Late one night when we were over at their house, he convinces me to have sex with him on the trampoline in the backyard. He keeps reassuring me they're already asleep. The next morning, he informs me it was a setup and they were watching us through the bedroom window the whole time. Once again, I have that feeling of losing my grip and falling from the jungle gym. This time when I hit the ground, it's God's voice that brings my breath back. This is what your husband most desires, and it's your job to help him get it. I apologize to Brad for feeling betrayed and pray for the willpower to overcome my resistance. God is with me, after all. One relentless step at a time, Brad obliterates my boundaries until I am lying on a bed with another woman's husband on top of me, while my husband lies next to me on top of this man's wife. The mental gymnastics I use to calm my aversions are like the ones I've been practicing during sex with Brad over 3 years now. I have my timing down pat. What sounds to make, how to move, what to say, and when. Of course, this new arrangement requires an extra level of vigilance. Since the entire point is Brad's satisfaction, I always keep one eye on him and reserve my primary attention for his needs and desires. I monitor the other wife's behavior to ensure that she is working hard enough to meet Brad's needs. I also take care to keep her husband sufficiently occupied so that he doesn't detract from Brad's connection with his wife. My awareness floats above my body, noticing my physical movements with detached apathy. At first, we just used couples from church, but with such a small congregation, we run through our options in a few weekends. At this point, we officially leave the religion we were both raised in. I am not concerned about my standing with God. I am more concerned than ever that the power abides in the man, not the organization. Brad is my leader, and God requires my submission to him. As proof of God's approval, I remind myself of the physical blessings he continues to bestow upon us. Brad just got a raise at work. Our firstborn is a happy, well-adjusted toddler. I'm experiencing a healthy pregnancy. We have a robust social life, especially after dark. I spend a lot of time outside my body. I work hard to ignore the pit of hardening resentment located somewhere deep beneath the growing baby inside me. Sometimes when Brad hugs me, stomach acid sears the back of my throat. I soldier on until I am comfortable having sex with whoever Brad puts in front of me. Brad expands his search for willing couples to swingers hotlines and newspaper ads. I perfect my phone sex voice to attract potential takers. But as I enter my last trimester, Brad starts coming home from work later and later. He stops arranging our foursomes and isn't sharing his fantasies with me anymore. Although I welcome the break, I know he's up to something else with someone else. We've already crossed so many lines, I'm not sure if cheating is technically possible at this point, but I do feel betrayed that he's doing this behind my back. One night he doesn't show up for dinner. I promise myself if he doesn't come home tonight, I will have proof of infidelity. Around midnight, I fall into a fitful sleep on the couch. He shows up at 3:30 in the morning and I confront him. You've been with another woman, haven't you? My heart is pounding in my ears as I take shallow sips of air. I will only tell you the truth on one condition, he responds. You have to promise me you won't ask me to stop. There it is again, the falling sensation. When my heart hits the ground, I drop my head and gently nod. I promise, I whisper meekly. He in turn promises never to keep another secret about a sexual fantasy or conquest. The next night, he brings his new girlfriend Cindy home for a threesome. To my surprise, this arrangement is more manageable than the foursomes. Since she's already interested in Brad, I don't have to navigate the jealousy factor. I also don't have to deal with any extra testosterone. She's much gentler and more tender than the men. I feel safe enough to inhabit my own body during the entire sexual experience. It's nice. A month later, my second home birth is attended by my midwife, Susie, her apprentice, my mom, my husband, and Cindy. Our beautiful daughter, Hannah, is a welcome distraction that I am confident will buy me a few weeks' break. Just 3 days after the birth, Brad and Cindy have begun arguing and are on the outs. He starts demanding sex from me just a week postpartum. His appetite is growing. With 2 little ones to care for, I'm already exhausted all the time. But he has his needs. We fall into a pattern of having sex at least once a day during the week and up to 5 times a day on the weekends. This frequency continues through the end of the relationship. As Hannah turns a year old, I become pregnant for the 3rd time. I realize a pattern. Brad's sexual appetite spikes when I'm pregnant. By now, I've gotten good at knowing his type and predicting which husbands will cooperate best. Brad is notorious for inflating the wife's response to his sexual prowess. He always needs to feel like an amazing lover and regularly interprets their behavior to mean they're falling in love with him. He develops an elaborate fantasy about us swinging with a couple and the wife immediately running away from her husband to live with us. I play along to keep him happy, reassuring him it will surely happen next time. But his depressive episodes are becoming unmanageable. He grows increasingly anxious, needy, and impatient. And then it happens. We hook up with a young couple, and the next day the girl calls us back. She claims she is being abused by her boyfriend and needs help. Brad interprets this as code for she fell in love with me and needs an excuse to get out. By the end of the week, I've arranged to move her into our home. Celeste is the girl of Brad's dreams and everything I am not. At 24 years old and 6 months pregnant, I am the old worn-out shoe he is comfortable coming home to, as he puts it. She is an 18-year-old black-haired porcelain skin goddess with a tiny waist and voluptuous breasts. At barely 5 feet tall, she fits perfectly under my armpit. Responding to Brad's excitement at this dream come true, I decide to not just move her into our house, but right into my place in our family. I empty my closet, grab my toiletries, and change the bed sheets. She is officially his new woman. The first night, I lie awake on the couch for hours listening to their sex noises. I fall from the great height of the jungle gym over and over until I'm sure I will never breathe again. I sure as hell hope God is paying attention because he owes me big. By the second night, I've made a pallet in the front room to share with my 2 kids. I explain that I am the old mommy and that Celeste is the new mommy. Gideon and Hannah are used to being ignored and neglected, and they are thrilled to have my undivided attention. Celeste doesn't have a car or a job, so she occupies Brad's attention 100% of the time when he's home. My presence is required for a threesome about once a week, but otherwise, I am determined to enjoy a blissful vacation from my wifely duties. I cook and clean for Brad and Celeste, but for the first time in 6 years, I get a break from sex. I play with my kids and enjoy the simple pleasures of a full night's sleep. My pregnant belly is perfectly happy sleeping on the floor, cuddled up with my littles. If you've ever been caught in a cycle of victimhood where you felt utterly controlled by outside forces and unable to escape, you might benefit from digging a little deeper on this topic. I'd love for you to check out the Chapter 5 study guide for more resources on how to escape this cluster and regain your inherent power. Download it at theuntherapist.com/chapter 5. Okay, hold on. Chapter 6. The Rescue Mission. Chapter Framework. The old belief before Untherapy, I do not matter. My only worth is derived from my ability to successfully support and fix other people. I am not allowed to have an opinion. I deserve to be abused. It is for my own good and the only way to keep me in line. Based on my sacrifice, I am earning a reward with God, which he will owe me at some undetermined point in the future. The Untherapy perspective, life is a non-zero sum game. Everyone can win. My having more does not equal less for you. Lack is an illusion that challenges us to process our negative emotions and evolve our understanding. There is no glory in playing the martyr. Any belief that reinforces martyrdom is misguided and produces unnecessary misery. The divine never stops reaching out to us, conspiring on our behalf to produce healing and growth. Even if we are actively working to thwart these blessings, we still end up receiving many of them. They are powerful proof of the true nature of life and the divine. And the quote for this chapter is, fall 7 times and stand up late. Stand up 8. It's a Japanese proverb. Fall 7 times, stand up 8. Brad has been gradually restricting my contact with the outside world. I haven't had a friend in years, and he recently dropped the ultimatum that I could either have a relationship with my mom or have sex with him. Oh, how I wanted to choose my mom, but a good wife wouldn't dream of such nonsense. I haven't spoken to my family in months. No one knows what is going on behind our closed doors. Celeste spends her days telling me stories from her past, playing with my babies, now 2 and 4 years old, and waiting for Brad to get home. I enjoy her company. It's nice to have a friend. Celeste reminds me of Delilah, and I immediately become her therapist. Once we've worked through her big childhood traumas, she reveals that her deepest desire is to have a child. Due to a mysterious medical condition I've never heard of, her doctor told her she can't have kids, ever. My heart breaks for her. Here I have these 2 beautiful children who are more than I ever deserved. Brad regularly reminds me, often in front of them, what a terrible mother I am and how I shouldn't be allowed to raise them. And here I have a 3rd child on the way. It's almost too much. Wait, maybe it is too much. A perfect solution forms in my heart. I will give my baby to Celeste. My understanding of the Godhead is that the bloodline follows the Father. The methodical cadence of my dad's voice plodding through the Old Testament genealogies rings in my head. And Nahshon begat Salma, and Salma begat Boaz, and Boaz begat Obed, and Obed begat Jesse. First Chronicles 2, 11 through 12, King James Version. This child will stay under the protection of its divine parent. Celeste will receive the blessing she's always wanted, and I won't risk ruining another child. As soon as Brad is convinced that I'm serious, he gives the go-ahead to make all the arrangements. Celeste starts attending our prenatal visits, much to my midwife Susie's chagrin, and I buy a breast pump so she can start stimulating her hormones to produce a milk supply for the newborn. Every time my baby moves inside my swelling belly, I whisper loving reassurances that I will take care of him, I'm guessing it's a boy, for a few more months until he can go to the perfect parents for him. A month passes and Celeste is slipping out of the honeymoon phase. I don't hear crazy sex noises at all hours of the night anymore, and she stopped using her breast pump. Without warning, she runs off to Nebraska. Brad is so distraught, he doesn't even demand sex from me while she's gone. I am more than happy to mother him in his distress. As he descends into debilitating depression and armed only with a phone book and fierce determination, I somehow manage to track her down at a seedy hotel outside of Omaha. The manager begs me to come pick her up. It sounds like an orgy in there 24/7, he says. They're bothering the other guests. Brad is packed up and on his way in less than 30 minutes. Over a long weekend, he eventually convinces her to leave the old boyfriend she was hooking up with and return home. Celeste comes back with a renewed determination to make this arrangement fun. One night, she and Brad approach me to act out her fantasy of watching him beat me up. The first blow lands square on my jaw with a jarring thud. I look him straight in the eyes as fire courses through my veins. I know something in this moment with absolute certainty. If we were in an actual fistfight, I would win. Is that all you've got? I sneer. He stumbles back and falls to the floor sobbing. What have I done? I've turned into my father, he wails. Celeste consoles him, and after a short pep talk, he resumes the beating. When she's had her fill, we sit in the garage while she smokes a cigarette. They tell me I'm going to be their love slave, and they describe the tattoo they've designed for me. The next morning, with yellow and blue bruises dotting my face, I tell them I don't think I can do this. I don't want to be their love slave. Too late, Celeste responds brusquely. This is what you signed up for. She grabs Brad's hand and they retire to the bedroom. In moments, their familiar sex noises assault my senses once again. I sink into the couch, numb with defeat. The shrill ring of the phone startles me out of my haze. It's Brad's older sister, Rosie. She still holds a grudge for my mishandling of the Delilah rape debacle 6 years ago, so I'm not surprised at the curt tone she takes as she demands to speak with her brother. Her lack of decorum, coupled with the events of the previous several weeks, have strained my pregnant mind to the breaking point. A hard lump of resentment deep in my gut prompts me to reckless action. I pull the pin and lob the grenade ever so gently into the phone. Oh, he's busy having sex with his girlfriend in the bedroom. Want me to take a message? I hold the phone away from my ear for a solid 90 seconds while she lets off the first layer of steam. Now that the seal is broken, the questions come hard and fast. What am I allowing? When did this start? How are the kids coping? Like floodwaters breaching a levee, the truth comes tumbling out. I tell her the whole story of how Celeste joined our family, ending with my plan to give my baby up to her for adoption. The line grows quiet. In a measured voice, she quotes Psalm 127, verse 3. Behold, children are a gift of the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. After a long pause, she adds, that is a gift from God that is meant for you, not some slut that's banging my brother. As if God himself had spoken, these words snap me out of my stupor. With a burst of insight, I hang up and call my dad. In an ongoing effort to alienate me from my family, Brad has recently enjoyed making me write carefully curated letters to my parents that reflect my absolute submission. 3 weeks ago, Dad showed up at my doorstep unannounced to plead with me. After a brief conversation in the driveway, I sent him away on the 6-hour return trip. He answers on the first ring. Hey, Dad, you know how you've been worried about me? Yeah, what you said would happen is happening. I need to get out of here fast. Without hesitation, he replies, I'll be there in the morning. After Brad and Celeste go to bed, I surreptitiously pack a small bag for each kid and one for myself. I lie awake all night on our floor pallet, their little bodies curled trustingly around me. I rise early to write a note. Dear Brad and Celeste, I need a break. I'll only be gone for a couple of weeks. There's leftover chili in the fridge. See you soon. Love, A. I grab the kids and slip out the front door before anyone else wakes up. Moving back in with my parents at 25 years old is an eye-opener. The rules and restrictions of my childhood are not so noticeable, and the nightly Bible studies soothe my tired soul. They have a small guest house where Gideon, Hannah, and I have our privacy. My 2 little sisters, Ruth and Abigail, are homeschooled teenagers now. I tutor them and borrow their car to run errands. Mom bakes bread and cooks delicious meals from the garden, all the while listening graciously to the endless waterfall of overdue words I finally get to express. As days turn into weeks, my intention to return home gradually fades. Dad encourages me to talk to a divorce lawyer. Frankly, I'm shocked at this suggestion since he's the one who taught me the evils of ending a marriage. He explains that there are exemptions and offers to pay for it. I temporarily suspend my decision in order to focus on a more pressing issue. I've had exactly 1 month to change the narrative with the growing life inside me. You are my baby, I reassure him. I promise to take care of you and never let you go. I'm sorry for almost giving you away. I worry that my mental state has damaged him, and I pray he will be fully formed and healthy. Precisely on my due date, Mom and my local midwife helped me give birth in my little sister's bed. She is away at summer camp. I was right. He is a boy, and I get to choose his name all by myself. 4-year-old big brother Gideon gets to cut the cord. At 10 pounds 11 ounces, Luke is perfect in every way. My whole being breathes an epic sigh of relief. The midwife shows me the hard ridge of calcification bordering my placenta. She has only seen this in mothers who smoke during their pregnancy or those who experience severe stress. I decide to move forward with divorce proceedings. Brad comes up for an initial hearing and wants to see the kids. Dad is not allowing him on the property, which is understandable, so I agree to meet him in town where the local fair is underway. We let the kids ride ponies and play carnival games while we talk. It's been 5 months since I was physically near him, and it feels like all those terrible memories were just a bad movie I never want to watch again. A beautiful sunset spreads orange and pink hues across the happy families milling through the fairgrounds. With the sweet smell of cotton candy and funnel cakes wafting by, Brad pours out his heart. He tells me how much he misses me and how Celeste was a mistake. He wants our family back together. He never stopped loving me and can't forget how special I am to him. He promises that she's gone and he won't ever ask me to do anything I don't want to do again. And what about swinging? I ask. That's over, he assures me. We won't ever be swingers again. I am all he needs. Won't I please, please just come back home so we can have our life together again? He reaches for my hand and I let him hold it. My lonely, aching heart yearns for this fairy tale. He is my husband. He's the only one who can make all my dreams come true. In the gossamer twilight, we stroll by a man I recognize. It's my lawyer. He gives me a meaningful side eye as we make our way through the crowd. I decide that he doesn't understand loneliness. It takes me a couple weeks to process this new development. At my next appointment with the lawyer, he reads my mind like a fortune teller. He's seen it 1,000 times, he says. He knows I've already made up my mind. I sit down with Dad to let him know. We arrange ourselves cross-legged on his bed as I explain the miracle God has performed to heal and restore my family. Always the stoic, I expect my dad to express an appropriate level of subdued joy at my divine victory. Instead, for only the second time in my life, I witness tears rolling down his face. He begs me not to go, but I will not be dissuaded from the will of the Almighty for my life. Brad moves us back home later that week. I bubble over with excitement on the trip home, but as I step in the front door, an uneasy feeling prompts a trepidatious pause. The kids run on ahead, eager to play with toys they haven't seen in months. As I enter the living room, I see it. There on the floor, not 5 feet in front of me, is a shoe. Actually, a sandal, the goddess style that wraps up your ankle, Celeste's sandal. That old familiar feeling upends me. I am falling, grabbing at the air. Brad notices my gaze. My breath finally returns. Is she still here? My incredulous tone sounds at once angry and sad. He rushes to reassure me that she's almost moved out and I won't have to see her. He's taking the last of her things to her later today. I point out that somehow he failed to mention his ongoing contact with her. I was under the impression she left months ago. It is over, he insists, but I don't believe him. And now I feel trapped. I just burned the only bridge I had when I made my dad cry. Within the first 6 months of being back, I go from hopeful to helpless. Celeste is still in the picture, and when I demand that Brad stop spending time with her, he reveals that she's pregnant. Turns out that medical condition that rendered her barren was borrowed from her favorite soap opera, as were most of the stories she told me. He's also angry that I ever left and holds it against me every chance he gets. He starts hitting me, not for fantasy reasons this time, but as an outlet for his anger. His depressive episodes are getting longer and more severe, and he adds threats of suicide to his repertoire. One day, upon returning home from work, he removes his shoes just inside the front door. When I inquire, he demonstrates how to sanitize the soles before putting them away in the closet. Every few days, he repeats this strange behavior. He supervises the first few cleanings and thereafter lets me do it myself, always inspecting to verify it was done correctly. Several weeks pass, and he finally reveals that he has recently discovered a suppressed childhood memory of being molested by his stepfather. As a way of processing the abuse, he has been frequenting the viewing booths at local porn shops to hook up with other men. The floors there are unsanitary for obvious reasons, hence the need to meticulously clean his shoes. When I ask him if it's helping, he says sometimes. When I ask him if that's why he and Delilah were sexually active as children, he says their games were always her idea. He doesn't know if she was molested. When I ask if he's using a condom, he hits me in the back of the head with an unopened can of Sprite he is holding. The force of the blow explodes the can open, spraying sticky liquid over the whole room. I barely notice the knot on the back of my head. I rush to clean up the mess, making a note to care less about my health and safety from now on. Brad's suicidal tendencies become a normal part of his cycle. At least once a month, he disappears, calling every few minutes to detail exactly how he's going to kill himself. When he finally stops calling, I sink back in the bed, hoping this time he will go through with it. Everything would be so much easier, I tell myself. But he won't. I know he won't. It would be too easy. That's just not how my life works. It is at these lowest moments, when I've spent every last drop of energy I possess and my little kids are crying for me from the other room, that I feel inexplicable comfort deep in my soul. Every time my heart hits rock bottom, I know that it will get better. I have no proof and no understanding of how this will happen. I just know. Brad will heal, we will be happy, and everything will magically turn into cupcakes and roses. Then I will get to do what I've always wanted to do, help other people who are struggling. It makes no sense, but it keeps me going. And at this point, I'll take any shred of hope I can get. He's ready to start swinging again. He insists that I at least owe him that much. I hold out for 2 more months, but each day the pressure is a little worse. He has started hitting me most days, but only on my head and abdomen where the bruises won't show. One night while we're watching TV, I unexpectedly break down sobbing at a diaper commercial. A pregnancy test eliminates any doubt. I'm having another baby. As with the previous pregnancies, Brad's sexual appetite kicks into overdrive. I finally capitulate. We frequent bars and nightclubs for hookups, but we have even more luck at sex clubs. As we become regulars at several local establishments, Brad and I are now an active part of the swinging community. Unlike regular bars, women are never groped or dominated in these settings. The rules of each club clearly define consent and encourage couples to work through issues of trust, boundary setting, and communication ahead of time. Only a handful of single males are granted entrance on any given night. Bouncers stand by, ready to remove any man who bothers a woman in any way. Everyone knows the unspoken rule. Inside these walls, women have all the power. For our purposes, this arrangement is perfect, and in my desire to please Brad, the irony is completely lost on me. I consider myself unrapeable. It has been so long since my body belonged to me that I can no longer imagine a scenario where I would have an opinion about what was being done to me. Brad selects the woman he wants, and I work my magic to seduce the couple into a private room so he can have his way with her. All I must do is keep the husband occupied until Brad is finished. Experienced couples have already defined their boundaries and rules before any play commences. A short conversation at the outset avoids any awkward mishaps. This boundary talk harkens back to my dating days, except there are 4 people and the rules are set by everyone but me. The most common boundary is no kissing. It's too intimate. Brad has set this rule for our relationship as well. These men can touch me all over and put their body parts in any opening they desire, but heaven forbid they would touch their lips to mine. That is reserved for the sanctity of marriage. Sometimes the wife is into other women and she and I put on the show for the men. This is the only time I can relax and enjoy myself. Women are so gentle and attentive by comparison. It's a tiny oasis of pleasure amid masterminding Brad's experience, but I never let myself get so lost in the moment that I forget why we're really here. Sometimes we find a newbie couple to play with. I become adept at discerning the ones with adventurous, carefree energy. They have the fewest boundaries, and Brad usually ends up getting more of what he wants. I learned to predict when Brad is wanting to go to the sex club because for a few days prior, he stops hitting me where others would see the bruises. I give birth to my 4th child 3 weeks after my 27th birthday. Midwife Susie needed quite a few questions answered before she would take me on again, but thankfully she has forgiven my poor judgment and supports me beautifully through yet another home birthing experience. Susie has become a therapist of sorts. I never reveal the truth of my existence to her, but she has nurtured and supported me through the toughest parts of my life for over 6 years. This is the only birth my mom does not attend. I miss her. Once again, I am sure of the gender ahead of time. It feels like another boy. I've gone 3 for 3 on my guesses, so there's no reason to doubt my intuition. Ella arrives in defiant triumph. Her fierce spirit knows what she wants and isn't afraid to go there. She is so unlike me, even as an infant, that I marvel at how she could have come from my body. I decide she must have needed that determination to thrive in the toxic environment of my womb. My life continues as a blur, raising 4 children and waiting on my increasingly complicated husband's every whim. Weekends are the hardest. Without work to keep him occupied, Brad locks me in the bedroom for hours at a time, demanding that I placate the monster of his ever-increasing sexual appetite. Big brother Gideon watches his younger siblings as well as an 8-year-old could be expected to. I get strep throat at least once a month, but I tough it out and always recover without having to break down and go to the doctor. Sometimes when Brad hugs me, I grit my teeth so hard it blurs my vision. One particularly gloomy Saturday night, Brad is in the mood to have some fun. I've just recovered from my most recent bout with strep and want nothing more than a warm shower and a long night's sleep. One look at his stone-faced expression, and I scurry to my closet for a sexy outfit. We argue all the way to the club, which is more of an exercise in how many ways I can apologize for existing. As we sit in the parking lot, my body glues itself to the seat, too exhausted to move. Finally, I peel myself out of the car and head to the front door. I will myself to reach for the handle, but even as I pull, Brad is railing at me to put up or shut up. Going home at this point would be certain disaster, so I decide to gamble on the club. Maybe some woman here is looking for what he has to offer. I spend the first hour milling around, greeting the regulars and scoping for new talent. Brad is at the tipping point of succumbing to ennui, and I'm moments from conceding defeat. And then it happens. If this chapter stirred some strong emotions about the harder parts of your life, especially the cycles that seem to constantly pull you back into harmful relationships or addictive behaviors, I'd love to offer you the Chapter 6 study guide, which delves deeper into these issues. Download it at theuntherapist.com/chapter 6 to learn more about how you can cooperate with the natural support of the divine to rescue yourself.